You are not going in there. My mother's hand clamped onto my wrist, stopping me inches from the ballroom doors. She looked me up and down like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Look at you, she hissed. You are a stain, Julia. A literal stain on the aesthetic. We told the groom's family you were unavailable. I kept my voice steady. Unavailable? Or unpresentable? Both, she snapped. Now move. If you're hungry, go stand in the back with the dishwashers. Maybe they'll throw you a roll. She turned her back on me, dismissing her own daughter as easily as a dirty napkin. I didn't argue. I just checked my watch. 1:12. Perfect. I walked away from the service corridor and found a quiet alcove near the catering staging area. The air here smelled of expensive steak and anxiety as servers rushed trays of hors d'oeuvres toward the garden. But I barely noticed them. I pulled my phone from my clutch. The screen glowed bright in the dim light, a stark contrast to the shadows where my family wanted me to stay. I didn't need to hack anything. I didn't need to guess a password or steal a fingerprint. I just opened my Outlook app and tapped the drafts folder. One email was waiting there, preloaded and ready to go. The subject line was simple, professional, and lethal. Dr. John. Audit report. Tax evasion and insurance fraud. I scrolled through the attachments one last time. It was all there. The corporate credit card statements showing $85,000 in wedding expenses labeled as medical conference fees. The invoices for the venue. The flowers. The catering. All paid for with pre-tax dollars from his clinic's operating account. It was a textbook case of commingling funds. The kind of sloppy arrogance that sends doctors to federal prison every day. My thumb hovered over the send button, but I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I tapped the arrow next to it and selected Scheduled Send. I scrolled the time wheel forward. 20 minutes. That was all the time I was giving him. I watched the confirmation banner flash across the top of the screen. Scheduled for 1:40 p.m. The countdown had begun. People always think revenge is about passion. They think it's about screaming matches, thrown drinks, and tearful confessions. But I know better. I'm a lead fraud auditor. I spend my life hunting predators who think they're too smart to get caught. I know that real destruction is quiet. It's methodical. It's the patience of a predator watching a gazelle step into a trap it doesn't even see. For 29 years, my family treated me like I was invisible. Like I was nothing more than a background character in their perfect life. They thought I was missing. They were wrong. I wasn't missing. I was compiling evidence. I looked at the phone in my hand. It felt heavy, like a loaded weapon with the safety off. For months, I had watched John spend money he didn't have. I watched him sign checks with a flourish. Watched him brag about the vintage champagne. Watched him preen like a peacock while using stolen feathers. Every time he swiped that corporate card, he wasn't just buying luxury. He was handing me another bullet. And now, I had a full clip. My pulse remained steady. My hands were dry. There was no adrenaline rush. Just the cold, hard satisfaction of a ledger finally balancing out. They called me a stain. They called me a missing piece. They had no idea that the missing piece is the only thing holding the entire structure together. And when you remove it, everything falls. I slipped the phone back into my purse. 19 minutes left. I smoothed the front of my dress, checked my reflection in the darkened window of the kitchen door, and turned toward the groom's suite. It was time to go see the happy couple. I leaned against the wall, watching the hallway clock tick down. 18 minutes. Through the open doors of the staging area, I could see the floral arrangements being prepped for the aisle. White orchids, thousands of them. They cascaded from gold stands like frozen waterfalls. I knew the invoice by heart because I'd flagged it in the system 3 days ago. $85,000 for flowers that would be dead by tomorrow morning. The number stuck in my throat. 85,000. It was obscene. But it wasn't just the waste that made my stomach turn. It was the familiarity of it. My family had always been comfortable spending money they didn't have, especially when it was stolen from me. The scent of the orchids was heavy, cloying. It dragged me back to a bank lobby 11 years ago. I was 18, standing at the counter with my college acceptance letter in my backpack and a withdrawal slip in my hand. I needed the first semester's tuition. The teller typed in my account number, frowned, and then gave me a look of pity that I still see in my nightmares. She told me the account had been closed yesterday. The funds were transferred to a joint account held by my parents. $28,000. My grandmother had left it to me in a UTMA trust, meant solely for my education. Gone. I drove home so fast the steering wheel shook in my hands. I found them in the driveway. My father, Andrew, was circling a brand new white convertible with a red bow on the hood. Sophia was in the driver's seat, squealing, her hands flapping in excitement. She was 16. She didn't even have a license yet. I slammed my car door. I demanded to know why my college fund was sitting on 4 rubber tires. My father didn't even look up from polishing the hood. He just shrugged, like he was explaining why it rained. He told me Sophia needed it. He said appearance mattered. That she was fragile. She was art. And you have to protect art. He finally turned to me, his eyes flat and bored, and told me that I was cast iron cookware, durable. He said I could take a beating and still work. He said I would figure out a way to pay for school because Sophia couldn't. Cast iron. That was his nickname for me. Useful. Ugly. Made to be burned. They stripped my future to buy her a toy. They sent me into the world with nothing but debt and a lesson in betrayal. While they polished their golden child and waited for her to marry rich, they thought they had broken me. They thought that by taking my money, they had taken my power. I looked down at my phone. 17 minutes. They were right about one thing. I am cast iron. I took the heat. I took the pressure. And I hardened. I worked double shifts. I took out loans. I studied forensic accounting, while Sophia failed out of 3 different luxury colleges. I clawed my way up from an entry-level analyst to the lead fraud auditor for the biggest insurance conglomerate in the country. I spent a decade learning exactly how people like John hide their money. Andrew called me cookware. He forgot that cast iron is heavy enough to crush a skull if you swing it hard enough. And today, I wasn't just swinging. I was dropping the whole anvil. I pushed off the wall and headed toward the groom's suite. It was time to show them exactly what durable looks like. The hallway to the groom's suite was guarded by a groomsman who looked like he'd been poured into his tuxedo. He crossed his arms as I approached, his eyes flicking over my plain dress with practiced boredom. He told me it was family only, reciting the line he'd probably used on 3 caterers already. I didn't fight him. I didn't pull rank. I just sighed. The heavy, exhausted exhale of a woman who has spent her life cleaning up other people's messes. I lifted the cheap garment bag I'd grabbed from the coat check. It was empty, but he didn't know that. I told him I was the sister, and that Mom sent me to steam his jacket because he knew how she gets if there is a wrinkle. He rolled his eyes, sympathy flashing across his face for a split second. He knew exactly how she gets. He stepped aside and wished me luck. I slipped past him and opened the heavy oak door. The air inside was freezing, chilled to preserve the flowers and the egos. John and Sophia were lounging on a leather sofa, a bottle of vintage Krug sitting in a silver bucket between them. They looked like a magazine spread come to life. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect indifference to the cost of anything. Sophia spotted me first. Her smile vanished, replaced by a sneer so familiar it felt like a childhood scar. She groaned and threw her head back, asking if Mom let me in. She smoothed the skirt of her silk robe, acting as if my mere presence was contaminating the fabric. She told me I was like a stain on her dress, and that looking at me made her feel cheap. She told me to go find a corner and stay there until they needed someone to hold a train. John laughed. He swirled his glass, the golden liquid catching the light. I recognized the label immediately. Krug, 1998. $300 a bottle. I'd seen the receipt yesterday, marked under office supplies on his clinic's ledger. He took a sip, savoring the taste of felony tax evasion. He told Sophia to let me stay. He said every masterpiece needs a blank canvas to make it pop, and that I was just beige. He turned his gaze to me, his eyes glassy with unearned confidence. He told me he was marrying perfection today because Sophia was art, and I was just the packaging they threw away after opening the gift. He told me not to speak or breathe too loud, but to just exist somewhere else. They clinked glasses, toasting to their own magnificence. They thought they were untouchable. They thought the world was a stage built specifically for them. I watched John drain the glass. He had no idea that the champagne he was drinking was evidence. He had no idea that the packaging standing in front of him was about to foreclose on his entire life. I walked toward the coffee table. My heels clicked on the hardwood, a sharp, rhythmic countdown. I told John to enjoy the wine. I told him he paid a lot for it. Or rather, the taxpayers did. John frowned, setting the glass down, and asked what I said. I reached into my bag and told him we needed to talk about his overhead. I pulled the manila envelope from my bag and dropped it onto the coffee table. It landed between the champagne bucket and a tray of untouched caviar, the heavy thud cutting through the room's artificial chill. I said the name United Guard Health. I asked John if it sounded familiar because they sign about 80% of his clinic's reimbursement checks. John blinked, his glass freezing halfway to his mouth. The arrogant smirk faltered, replaced by the twitchy confusion of a man trying to remember if he locked the back door. He asked what I was talking about and how I knew who his payers were. I told him I signed the checks. Well, technically I audit them, but I flag the ones that look suspicious. And I told him his entire ledger looks like a crime scene. Sophia scoffed, rolling her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. She told me to stop trying to sound important, accused me of answering phones at a call center, and told me to get out before she called security. I ignored her. My eyes stayed locked on John. I watched the realization crawl across his face, slow and agonizing. He looked at the file. Then he looked at me. He saw the black suit differently now. It wasn't a cheap outfit. It was a uniform. I lowered my voice to that low, flat register I used for depositions. I told him I am the lead fraud auditor for the Western region. I told him that for the last 3 months, he has been my primary case file. I told him I knew about the LLC he formed in Nevada to hide assets. I told him I knew he'd been billing cosmetic rhinoplasties as medically necessary deviated septum repairs to defraud the insurance pool. And I told him I knew that this morning. At 9 o'clock, he charged an $85,000 wedding to his practice's operating account under marketing and conference fees. John's face went gray. The glass in his hand tilted, champagne sloshing over the rim onto his expensive trousers. He didn't even notice. I stepped closer. I told him that was tax evasion. It was also wire fraud and embezzlement. I told him that in federal court, that meant 5 to 10 years. And that was before the medical board stripped his license and left him with nothing but a mountain of debt and a shiny new criminal record. Sophia stood up, her silk robe rustling. She shrilled that I was lying, but her voice lacked its usual bite. She looked at John, waiting for him to laugh, to mock me, to throw me out. But John wasn't laughing. He was staring at the file like it was a bomb. I challenged him to open it. He flipped through the folder with shaking hands. Highlighted credit card statements, private emails, and an invoice listing Krug Champagne as office supplies. He whispered that I'd hacked him. I corrected him. I audited him. I showed him my phone. An email scheduled to send in minutes to the state medical board. IRS criminal investigation. And my legal team. I set the phone down and told him the clock wouldn't stop unless he did exactly what I said. I explained he couldn't repay money that didn't exist, and restitution would only confirm guilt. Spending $85,000 on flowers and catering crossed from bad accounting into felony intent. Then I gave him the real choice. If he married Sophia, the wedding itself became money laundering constructive fraud. She would legally benefit from stolen funds, making her an accomplice. Her assets, and possibly her family's, would be exposed to seizure. I watched him realize she wasn't a bride anymore. She was a liability. I offered one way out. He had to walk away and publicly frame himself as a victim of manipulation. If he married her, they'd go down together. If he exposed them, he might save his license. He didn't hesitate. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and asked what to do. Minutes later, he stormed onto the terrace, stopped the wedding, and accused her family of fraud in front of 200 guests. He called off the checks, threatened police involvement, and walked out, slamming the door on Sophia as she begged him to stay. Police lights flooded the estate. The spectacle collapsed into chaos. From above, I watched, sipping the same Krug they'd tried to hide on the books. It tasted like justice. Later, my mother accused me of poisoning him. I told her the truth. I didn't make him leave. I showed him the math. He chose his money over her daughter, exactly as he was taught. I canceled the email. It was unnecessary. He'd already confessed publicly. I drove away, leaving the estate behind. They called me the missing piece. They were right. I was the structure holding everything up, and once I stepped away, it all collapsed on its own.